and welcome to Finextra. I'm Thea George and I'm here with Kevin Brown of KPMG. We're at Sibos 2016 in Geneva and we're talking about payments. Kevin, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Thea. It's good to be here.
So you were part of a session on intraday liquidity this morning. Can you tell me about how that went and what the key takeaways were?
Yes, certainly. I mean, it was a really good session. We had a very, very good panel moderated by Dennis Sweeney, and we were looking at the journey that the banks have been on since 2008 with applying and tightening the controls and the reporting on their intraday liquidity. And there were very good points coming out. I mean, two or three things which really worth picking up on. One was certainly from a bank perspective, there was a general feeling that there was a better driver from the controls perspective than just purely the regulatory. So banks needing to do this, so they had better visibility, better control of their daily intraday liquidity, as opposed to purely delivering the reporting. We did a couple of polls in terms of the session. Again, I think very typically we saw a picture where it's around about 2/3 of the banks and from the people in the room were looking at or were initiating a project around intraday liquidity reporting to comply with the BAL requirements. But a third were still in the camp of not started anything, either because their national community and their regulator hadn't set a deadline, or they just hadn't started to move forward. And I think that's quite a very typical mix. The other thing that struck us, I mean, and I think this is one of the things that's going to sort of really put pressure on this over the next 1 to 2 years. What you're starting to see is a move to real-time payments, and within that move to real-time payments, you're going to need to have an improved intraday real-time reporting process. And I think the comment was made. We are starting to move away from batch to real time, and that needs different skills, different capabilities, and different data. And certainly, the view was that there was still too narrow a resource base in the banks that understand liquidity and intraday liquidity specifically. So that was one of the challenges that was left on the table, alongside the normal ones, which was how do we get the data, how do we manipulate the data, and then what do we do with it, and how does that reporting work?
So it sounds like a good session, and in fact you've had a very busy week because you were also part of a Finextra session with MISIS looking at Internet of Things and APIs and data, among other topics. How did you feel that went, and what were the key learnings from that one for you?
It was a good session. It was quite a broad topic with Internet of Things, APIs, PSD2, but we got, I think, quite deeply into the whole discussion around how data is going to be used. We had the sort of standard. There's probably 57 varieties of definitions of Internet of Things, and we were very focused in terms of trying to get to the point where we were not talking about technology chasing solutions. We were looking for areas of friction where technology and the Internet of Things may improve the service delivery. I think one of the key takeaways, two key takeaways for me was around the data and how that data is going to be handled, ownership of that data, and the regulatory and legal requirements that will sit around that, particularly from an API perspective, but also an Internet of Things. But secondly, the need for banks to start working very closely with their corporates, not just at corporate treasurer level, but starting to work with the heads of digital in the corporates that they support, because banks are not yet identifying all of the areas of friction that might exist in the corporate's business that they're supporting, and it's quite a difficult conversation to have, but certainly that was one of the themes that came out of that session.
So you already mentioned instant payments when you were talking about intraday liquidity, and obviously you do a lot of work in that area, and you're doing some work right now in the US as they move towards instant. How do you think that discussion around real-time payments has evolved this year, and what do you think banks should be really doing about that topic right now?
Again, I think that the world is moving towards real time. I think you see very different challenges in different communities. So I've been working with the Australians and the US, and of course my background was very much around the UK's development. And what you're seeing is Australia is progressing towards the new payments platform. The banks are starting to understand the impact that that's going to have on their business and how that business will change. They're being very innovative, looking at the commercialisation opportunities, and again comes back to very similar to the conversation around the Internet of Things. They're getting closer to their corporates to understand where the opportunities sit. The same can be said of the US. I think they've got some different challenges because the traditional business case for real time is a difficult one. And particularly more difficult if you focus purely on revenue. And I know when we looked at it in the UK, we took a much broader view in terms of looking at the P&L impact. So we were looking at sort of margins, cost areas to take out, alongside what revenues might flow in terms of the mix of business. And I think the US have got already same-day ACH, which the first stage went live, I think last week or the week before. So they've got a broader base and more challenges around making that business case work, because for a lot of corporates, big corporates, same-day ACH is going to deliver a lot of value, and it will be some time before the pressure on real-time will start to move that away. But it's really good that the banks are very much focusing on where the friction is, where the needs are, and how to deliver it. I think the biggest second challenge they'll have is around ubiquity. In the UK and I think in Australia, the focus has been there on achieving the right level of reach on day one. The US market is much more diverse. You've got 15,000 plus banks, and therefore achieving that reach is going to be a challenge. And I think as they've been looking at it, that's going to drive out some innovative new changes.
Kevin, thank you.
Thank you, Thea.
And thank you for watching.